Okay, so today we're going to be making a video centering around several hands I played against one particular opponent at 10-0 Zoom on PokerStars. I wanted to maybe wait a little bit longer before I made this video, so see if I could get some more hands against him. But for one reason or another, they haven't materialized. He may well be avoiding me in certain spots, or we just haven't had any spots come up together naturally. And the reason I want to talk about it is because I think it's very important to have a good overarching strategy, obviously, when you're playing these games. Obviously, any stake, but it's obviously very important to have a very solid strategy. But I do think that it's equally important to adjust accordingly to your opponent's play, make notes on their play, and use that against them in the future. So today we're going to be talking about how to play exploitatively against opponents that we have past information on. Now, I'm not going to be using the screen names for this video because I just don't think that's fair on the opponent I'm playing against. I obviously don't have that many people watching this or playing regularly at this stake, but I just think it's just would be out of order to put screen names on. So we're going to look at these hands in chronological order and how I used each hand to inform my decisions on hands succeeding that. Can't talk today for some reason. And we're just going to go through them like that. And we're going to talk about, we're going to start with our hand against against this opponent where we're using our strategy as we would normally, because we don't have any information on him. And then once we gain information, how we then use that information to adjust and exploit our opponent. So I was hoping to obviously have some more hands, but it looks like I may be moving up soon, so I may not see this guy as much. But I would say that this guy is one of the main reasons that I'm close to moving up. But he does kind of just give us money, but at the same time, you'll be able to see how we're able to piece together what we're doing and why we're doing it. So this is the first hand that I have against him. Now, obviously we have 300 hands on him, but this is the first hand that I can remember that I have on my database. I've gone through all of them. This is the first hand that we have that we play together that's, a big pot, a significant pot, or even, above 30 big blinds. So this is the first time I encounter him in a serious way. So we are in the big blind with kings, and our opponent is in the hijack and makes it 3 big blinds. So already we're seeing 3 big blinds from our opponent. Now, that's not a sizing that we regularly will see. So it's possible at this point that I don't actually know, how, if I had him already labeled as something. It's not possible for me to check that, but I would imagine when I see this size, I'm already thinking, okay, potentially weaker, but not looking too much into it because there are 3 other opponents on the table that have deeper stacks, so he may just want to size up for that. So we're not thinking too much about that, I don't think. We have a very easy 3-bet. I'd like to see 12 big blinds here, especially because we are deeper. Maybe even 12.5. And our opponent calls. Now the flop is 5 Jack 9 Rainbow. And this is a board where our opponent's going to be doing quite well. He's going to have 5s, Jacks, and 9s, whereas we might only have Jacks. He might not always have 5s, but he probably has it at some percentage, whereas we never have it. And obviously we have an overpair advantage. He may have queens, but I don't think he's going to have kings or aces. So we do need to be somewhat careful, but at the same time, he's going to have a lot of hands that want to continue that we have good equity against. So I think starting with a bet on the larger side, we don't want to go a 3rd pot here because I think there's going to be a lot of stuff that wants to continue, like I said, from him. But not sizing up too much. But we need to think about how we can get 3 streets of value on good runouts. So I think this is a good size to start on that basis. And we get raised quite large. Now, like I said, we have no history at this point in terms of big hands where I've got notes on him or anything. So we're going to be playing our hand very standard. We're going to fold some overcard backdoor flush combos that we might have continued with. And then we need to choose some hands in our value range to continue with. So this seems obviously a very good candidate. If we fold here, we're going to be folding way too often. So as part of my overall strategy, we're going to be obviously calling here. We're not making any adaptions. We have no reason to make any adaptions. Like I said, this is the first significant hand that we play against this opponent. So he can obviously have queen 10, diamonds, obviously we block king queen, or king 10, so that's not great. But so we'd much rather have aces here, but those hands are going to be quite loose. If he's going to be doing that, then that's quite loose. So queen 10 obviously is in there. Even like a 7-6 of hearts, stuff like that. And against that kind of sort of range, and we have no reason to think that he's not doing that at some frequency. So obviously we have some, we don't block any of those sort of hands, the queen 10s, the 7-6s, the 7-8s, the 10-8s, which are all in there at some frequency. Maybe not 10-8, but certainly 7-6 suited, 8-7 suited, queen 10 suited certainly are in there. And then obviously he has the hands that we spoke about. He's probably not going to have jack 9 very often, but he obviously will sometimes. And then 5s, jacks and 9s, which we're not happy about. But he will not raise those at 100% frequency. He's going to want to call those at some frequency too. Especially with jacks and 9s, where he locks up quite a significant portion of the board. I would say jacks is a hand that you'd certainly want to be calling with here, and maybe 9s you could look to raise. But as we've discussed, we're way too high up in our range, considering we can only really have jacks that is better than aces and kings here. So we certainly need to continue against that range of hands that we've described. We see a very good turn. Obviously now queen 10 we're going to lose to, but that's just one of those things, and we're not going to think too much about that. So we're just looking to obviously check. He's going to continue obviously with like the 7-8 of hearts, 7-6-7 of hearts type of hands. They're going to get stacked by queen 10, but have some equity. And then jacks and 9s are obviously now going to beat. So there are some value hands that we lost to on the flop that we now beat, and there are some bluffs that we now lose to. Specifically queen 10 suited, which there are 4 combos left of. So we're just looking to check and get the money in. He's going to be, obviously we don't ever want to have a leading range here. We're checking out everything, all the hands that we have here. And I think quite often against this guy's range, we're going to be seeing him jam here. So we definitely don't need to bet. And if we were to bet, say we moved all in for whatever reason, he would just simply call with queen 10, jacks and 9s, and then and aces, and then he would fold all the hands that we want him to bluff with. So it doesn't achieve anything. So obviously we go for a check, and our opponent rips, and we have a very easy call. It bricks out, and we see ace queen. Now, immediately I'm making notes on this guy. I think I may even have given him a pink tag at this point. Excuse me, I just blow my nose very quickly. Excuse me. Now, ace queen, how do we feel about this on the flop, right? So we discussed what kind of range of hands he's going to have in terms of value and his bluffs. There's certainly a lot of bluffs that he can have on this board that he can use as bluffs, backdoor spades and straight draws and combo straight draws with backdoor flush draws. Which is why I really dislike this choice to raise bluff with. Because when he does raise bluff this, and I assume if he's going to raise bluff this, he's going to raise bluff all the hands that I previously mentioned, then he's just going to be bluffing way too often, because he only really has 3 combos of jacks and 3 combos of 9s, and then sometimes maybe 2 or 3 combos of 5s, and then maybe jack 9 sometimes, but that's not that many hands. So when he's going to be bluffing also with maybe 4 combos of queen 10 suited, 4 combos of 7-8 suited, 4 combos of 7-6 suited, potentially, maybe even ace queen with ace queen of spades, ace queen of diamonds, king queen of diamonds. If he's going to be doing that, he's going to have just way too many bluffs. So immediately we're thinking here, if I see this guy again, this guy probably has too many bluffs and doesn't really understand ranges to the extent where he's going to be balanced. He's going to try and win a lot of pots, and he's not going to have enough value hands to balance his bluffs. He's just going to have too much going on bluff wise. The turn jam, obviously he picks up a gut shot, and he still has an overcard. But yeah, I think once I bet call the flop, pretty much queens that I'm going to have is the only hand that I'm probably going to check fold. In terms of my overpairs, obviously kings and aces are going to stack off, and he does block queens. So I'm not a big fan at all of this play. Yeah, I'm going to be folding. I'm just going to be giving up on the flop. I'm just going to be either. I can definitely get behind calling the flop with two overcards, and a backdoor straight draw. But this is just way too aggressive, for the reasons we've described. So we have this hand. We stack our opponent and we make some notes. Now, shortly afterwards, oops, that is annoying. Just ignore that. Shortly afterwards, we see this hand. Same opponent. Villain number 4. And I hope that's not the case for all the hands. We see him raise, and now we have this note on him that he's been particularly aggressive in a single spot where we think he shouldn't have been. And now we may be thinking we want to get some pots in with him where we know that he's going to be a bit imbalanced towards bluffs. We want to have some, either we're thinking about getting good value hands that we maybe want to trap more often with, or we also want to have some hands that we call down lighter with based on how many bluffs he has. And that's what the adjustment we're going to be making is. We don't want to play our standard strategy because we're going to be missing value in spots where we have some good information. Like this guy's natural tendency is going to be towards having too many bluffs, and he doesn't know that, and he doesn't understand that. So we need to exploit that. And this is where you're going to make a lot of your money at micro stakes. You just need to make sure that you're making exploitative plays against people that you have information on. So we call on the button after the cutoff calls, and we see 8-5-4. So immediately I'm folding to any bet, and when check 2, we have a very clear check behind. The turn's an 8, which is a very good card for us. If we're obviously still trying to get our hand to showdown cheaply. And our opponent bets and cutoff folds. So we have what I think is a close decision. But when we think about this particular opponent, he would be betting probably an 8 on the flop, but not always. But he could certainly have an 8. But it's now less likely that he has an 8 because there's an 8 on the 2 8s on the board. All of his overpairs I expect to have continued. Obviously, any flopped straights, any flopped sets, any flopped 2 pairs. Ace 8, I would expect to continue. All that stuff. So when he bets the turn, and we've seen him, this is where it comes into before, where we have information that we've made notes on. When we see this turn bet, it's going to probably have too many bluffs in it because a lot of the value hands that we would expect to see would continue flop. So we go for the call, and we see a 6 of spades, and our opponent overbets. So when our opponent overbets here, he's representing either a very strong flush or a full house. Now, we need to think about what full houses and what flushes our opponents would have here. Well, 8-5 bets the flop. 8-4 bets the flop. 8-6 is a reasonable full house that our opponent could have backed into that he may have considered checking the flop with. But I don't think he would always check the flop. But 8-6 is there for sure. Pocket 5s, pocket 4s, pocket 8s all would have, I think, continued on the flop. And 6 is another reasonable hand that he could have, but obviously still unlikely, just as 8-6 is unlikely. And then we think about flushes. Now, he would have to have a flush that he decided not to continue the flop with. A flush draw that he decided not to continue the flop with. Now, from what we have gathered from information from this opponent previously, is that he has too many bluffs. I can't imagine someone that in a 3-bet pot raises Jack 9-5 rainbow with ace queen off is not going to be betting flush draws as part of that range. As part of, a general strategy, I believe that this kind of guy will be betting his flush draws. So when I look at my notes and I see this hand from before, excuse me, I'm thinking a lot of his flush draws are going to bet the flop. So if he doesn't have a flush and he has very unlikely full houses, what if he just has a hand like before when he just can't resist bluffing, like an ace queen high or any other random assortment of high cards? I don't think he's representing enough value after checking the flop here, is my point. And obviously our hand is very weak, but we do have a 2 of spades, which is somewhat important. I honestly do believe that this guy would never check a flush draw on the flop, given what I know about him from the previous hand. So, and not never, but very unlikely. So the 2 of spades is good, but not that significant. My call is going to be a lot based on the fact that he doesn't have many full houses, as we've talked about. So I do go for the call. And our opponent has ace queen high again. So now we make another note about this hand. Clearly our opponent has too many bluffs here. I mean, he has great showdown value here. Well, not great showdown value, but he has some showdown value. There's no need to be bluffing this turn. He's only going to get called by hands that beat him. And he's going to get folds from hands that are worse. So, again, we have more information from which to bet, from which to use in our next hands against him. So we have another note where opponent has too many bluffs. Same kind of thing. Too many bluffs. Doesn't understand that he doesn't have any value bets on this turn and river, really, based on the fact that he checked the flop. He's not really thinking on that level. So we need to use the fact that we are to exploit him in certain situations, which we may not normally use as part of our general strategy. But like I said, exploiting opponents is extremely important at micro stakes. Not at every stake, because not a lot of people are going to have weaknesses that are this glaring, but certainly people at micro stakes do very often. And if we don't make notes and we don't think about these situations, then we're going to miss a lot of value. This is a 71 big blind pot that I don't think this is actually a very difficult call, given what we know about this opponent from the previous hand. I think without the previous hand, I think we can fold here, and I definitely would fold here generally against the general pool. But against an opponent we know doesn't understand how often he should be bluffing and how often he should have value bets, etc., I think this is actually a very easy call. I know that seems strange, but I think this becomes a very clear call. I think we're missing value here if we don't call here, and we're only able to make this call based on previous information. So go to the next hand, and thankfully I haven't already spoiled it. Excuse me. For some reason I'm developing an illness. Right, same opponent. As you can see, the hands I have against him are going up, so you can see this is in chronological order. My hand history is not my all-time stats, it's just my stats from the session, but they don't really matter too much. And we have pocket 4s on the small blind, and we raise to 3 big blinds, and we get 3-bet. Now, against this particular opponent, I'm really looking to flop a set and give him the rope to hang himself with, based on the 2 previous hands that we now have. We have even more ammunition that supports our theory that this guy is bluffing too often and doesn't understand ranges very well. We call and we see 10-5-3. And we check and we have a over half pot bet. Now, against a lot of opponents, I think you can fold here, but majority of the time, even part of our general strategy, we want to be check calling here. We have a pair. The board's very, dry. We have a backdoor, etc. But then against this particular opponent, we do believe that he's continuing way too often. 2 overcards he's probably going to bet with, etc. So if we get a dry run out, we can certainly think about maybe calling down a little bit. The 9 of hearts. Obviously he's going to have some top pair stuff and whatever, but the main point that we're driving home is that this guy has too many bluffs for how many value bets he's going to have. And it goes check, check. So had he bet this turn, we would certainly have folded. We would expect this guy to continue with all of his overpairs, with all of his 10x, with all of his 2 pairs, with all of his sets, 10s and 9s he might have. So when he checks the turn, we're thinking probably some high card combos, and we don't know how many. If this guy's taking notes on us, we don't know if he's saying this guy just called me with an underpair to the board when I bet 2 streets with an overbet. I don't know if he's made that. I don't know if he's made that connection. It's safe to assume that he may probably not have done, considering the type of player he is. So he checks behind. Which isn't just, if he's going to have that many bluffs, I just don't expect that kind of player to check behind overpairs here, or to check behind very strong hands. So we're thinking we might be able to call some rivers. This particular river isn't great, but our opponent overbets 50 big blinds into 38. Now we need to think about what type of hands this guy would do this with. That would check the turn, okay? So obviously it's very tempting to just snap fold here. But I think that given the information that we've had from before, that he has a lot of bluffs in certain situations that he shouldn't have them, and he's going to be imbalanced towards bluffs, we need to give this some thought. So, and again, this guy has a lot of bluffs, so he's going to be value betting a lot. So when he checks the turn, he no longer has, let's think, queens. He no longer has aces, kings, 10s, 9s, queen jack even, stuff like that. King jack he may also consider, at least with a gut shot, to bet the turn, but he may check that back. The main point is he's overbet, so he's representing a set or better. He's telling me he has, if he bet like 20 here, I may even be more inclined to fold, because he's telling me that he can have, queen king, or ace queen sometimes, stuff like that. And obviously this card doesn't look great for my range that check calls flop and check turn, and then checks again on the river. So it might be a card that he uses as a bluff quite often. But the main point is he's telling me with an overbet that he has a set or better. Now, what sets does he have that don't bet the turn? I would argue 0. No 10s, no 5s, no 3s that decided to raise pre. No 9s for sure. Queens, I definitely think would continue the turn, given what we've already spoken about this opponent. So now we need to look at straights. Now he would have had to check back with Jack 8. Don't think that this guy would do that, considering how many bluffs how often he enjoys bluffing. I think with semi bluffs he's going to continue quite often. So King Jack, certainly a hand that he could have, but he's not always going to have that hand. Obviously he's not. He's sometimes. What I mean by that is he's sometimes going to continue turn, if not always, because of the kind of opponent he is. So we have to think about what this bet size represents, and if we don't think he has a set, and it's sometimes unlikely he's going to have Jack 8 and King Jack, those are the only hands. It's really important to understand. Those are the only hands that want to bet this size, I think. Queen 10 even, I think he would bet the turn with against me. So unless he's like barreling king queen or ace queen here as an overbet as some sick level, this is a very optional call. But given the logic that I've spoken about, like overbet here, needing to have a set or really better what he's representing, and not betting the turn, given that he always enjoys betting, I would expect him to bet with all these very strong hands, all his semi-bluffs, and on the turn. And all of those hands that would bet the turn that are either semi-bluffs or very strong hands are now what he is representing to have on the river. So given that he did not bet the turn, a lot of those hands are now, I think, not in his range on this river. So we go for the big hero call, and our opponent has ace jack high. We're not always going to win here, but I do think that our opponent's bet size leans us towards finding a call here. And obviously the history, I'm not going to call here against your typical run-of-the-mill bloke that I have no info on. Even if this guy, obviously, if I hadn't played, if it was the first hand I had against him where I had kings, and the king's hand was the third hand, this was the first hand, I wouldn't find this call. But we have found a way to play exploitatively against this guy, knowing his general tendencies. His check on the turn leads us to be able to make this call. So, the fourth hand. We have 10-9 of clubs, same opponent. And he makes it. So one of the interesting thing to say about this guy is that he always seems to have a stack, which is interesting to me because I believe he's quite a weak player. But he generally seems to accumulate chips. I always see him play. He's always playing. So it may just be that he plays for a long time. Eventually you're going to have chips if you play for a long time, I think. We go for the 3-bet. We're deeper. We want to build pots against this opponent where we can make, maybe, especially with hands that can have quite good like nutted potential, not nutted potential, but like potential to make very strong hands rather than just one pair hands or like top pair, top kicker hands. This is going to be a hand that we're going to make very good hands with, that we can potentially trap our opponent with. I'd like to see maybe this being slightly bigger when we're deeper against this particular guy. Our opponent calls, which we expect. And we're happy about. The main value is not going to be him from folding this pre. It's going to be from him calling and misplaying. And we now have 3 hands of information where we have been able to see that this guy does not understand what hands he's representing, how often to bluff, which hands to choose as bluffs, which hands he's not going to have as value bets. He's just sort of putting money in and sort of hoping for the best. Obviously a very good flop for our hand. And we can start with obviously a bet here. Right now we have 10 high. So we're happy to win at this point, but also happy for him to continue and for us to make our hand on. We start with a slightly bigger bet. The board's connected. I mean, we're about half pot here. The board's connected. He's going to have a lot of hands he wants to continue with, like 8s through 10s that he didn't 4-bet. Ace 7 suited, ace 6 suited, 5 8, stuff like that. He's gonna have a whole bunch. Maybe not 5 8, but our opponent calls. We turn the nuts, and against most opponents, I would consider this as a good card to bet with. We're going to want to continue with our overpairs here quite frequently. Not all the time, but quite frequently. Probably the ones with a club we're always going to want to continue with. So, or maybe not. That's another consideration. But mainly, the main consideration that I want to make here is our opponent has shown an incredible tendency towards overbluffing in the three previous hands that we've had against him. This card looks connected and scary for our range potentially, and our opponent might think that 2 big barrels would get us to fold, maybe an overpair. Now, what he doesn't know is that I'm never folding an overpair against him because I have 3 hands of history against him that suggest that I should never be doing that. But particularly with the nuts, I want to check to induce bluffs from a player that has far too many. So we check, and our opponent bets just over half the pot. And for the same reasons that we check, to obviously balance our checking range too, so that we can protect when we have like tens and we don't, want to face too many bets. This is a great hand to have in there. And obviously against this particular opponent, it's also a fantastic hand to check. For the same reasons that we want to check the turn, we also just want to call. We know our opponent is going to have a lot of bluffs, and shoving here is just going to make him call with sets that he's going to probably continue on many, many rivers with. And he's going to fold all his bluffs, which we hope are plentiful. We call, and we'd prefer not to make our flush, but we're not going to, considering we're going to be calling down quite light against this guy anyway. It's not the end of the world. We no longer have the nuts, but we obviously still have a very strong hand that's capable of calling. Now, we have another very clear check. Our opponent is going to see us maybe having tens, nines, jacks, queens that are going to have a really hard time on this river. If I didn't have a flush, I would think it unlikely still that he does have one because he didn't raise the flop, and we've seen him raise the flop with ace queen high. So, I mean, he sometimes is going to have one, but I do think he's going to apply a lot of pressure with flush draws. So we might even be able to find a call with like tens, jacks, queens with a club. I think that would be very good call downs as well. Our opponent puts us all in. Now I snap called here, but let's just think about it a little bit. Flushes we don't expect him to have very, very many of, but one consideration is, and I'm talking about as a general rule and our general strategy is, we're not going to fold here ever, but the general pool of players, when they overbet this river, are bluffing with like the ace of clubs, or they have the nut flush. This bet is representing only a flush, or a bluff. So the ace of clubs, but I would expect to only see the ace of clubs or the nuts here. Now, when this guy does not raise me on the flop, I don't put him on any flushes at all. But my point is, I'm no longer even concerned about being beat, because I just know that this guy is bluffing too often, and I know every time he has the ace of clubs, he's probably going to be doing this based on what I know about him. I can't imagine that he would choose ace queen offsuit on a board that does nothing for him, and then not use the ace of clubs here to bluff shove river. So obviously we've played this slightly differently to what we would maybe normally play without the information that we have. We've just wanted this opponent to overbluff on a card that might not look very good for our range, and this of the river obviously is going to put a lot of the hands that we are going to have here in a tough spot. What do you do with ace king here? What do you do with queens? What do you do with tens? What do you do with jacks? So I like the bet, especially with the ace of clubs, and I think it's a very good bet to make. I don't think a lot of people at this level will do it. I think they'll just check behind and give up. This guy I'd expect to do it 100% frequency, and then maybe obviously sometimes have a speed, but I do think he would raise a lot of, especially ace-side flushes that he's representing. He would raise a whole bunch of those draws on the flop. So never considering folding against this opponent. We call, and he has queen three of hearts. So this is probably the worst by far play that I've seen this guy make. The others are bad. This is horrific. Doesn't block any flushes, doesn't block any straights, doesn't block any value whatsoever that I can have. And it just goes to show what we're able to do with information from previous hands. We know this guy cannot resist bluffing. We know he has way too many bluffs in every spot. We know that he doesn't understand how to balance his bluffs and value bets. And we know he doesn't really care to. This makes this turn check a slam dunk. Now what's very sick about this hand, and probably the worst part, which goes unnoticed because he has punted off 140 blinds on the river, is that he called the flop, which I can only describe as... I actually don't have words. I'm not sure what he's. I mean, I guess he's literally just waiting for bluffy cards that he can be like, right, that's difficult for him with a lot of his range. I don't even know if he's thinking that. It's just, if he checks this turn, then I'm just going to barrel. And that might work against a lot of people, but as long as we can check against this particular opponent some very strong hands, allow him to overbluff. I mean, if he's bluffing with this, he's literally has. I mean, in terms of value here, as a bluff shove, you have ace high flush. In terms of value bets, you have ace high flush. You're not going to want to really do this. I mean, you probably will with a queen high flush, but majority of the time when you overbet this river, you're going to have an ace high flush. So you don't have an ace high flush very often, especially when you don't raise the flop, because sometimes you're going to want to raise the flop. And I think that this guy would always raise the flop, which means that we can sometimes call with obviously queens with the queen of clubs, etc. Blah 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 blah. So he has that as value, and then his bluffs are queen 3 of hearts, queen 4 of hearts, queen 5 of hearts, queen 10 of hearts, blah 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 blah, queen 10 of diamonds. Right? I mean, you get the picture. Just way too often. So yeah, this is how best to exploit opponents like this with information. And our last hand, pocket tens. Now we have 4 hands of information, and the most recent one being this guy is nuts, absolutely crazy. We can never be folding anything that has even remote value based on what we've seen. We get tens on the button, and our opponent raises the cutoff, and we 3-bet, and he 4-bets us. Now, against a lot of people, vast majority of the player pool at 10 and L, when I see this bet, I'm thinking, oh god, here we go, I'm in huge trouble here. Let's take a flop, and a lot of the time when we see low cards, we're going to be stacking off and never be good. Against this guy, I'm licking my lips. We're calling a position, and we're just going to be calling a hell of a lot of rundowns. And that is never a strategy that we're going to take against, or a strategy we're going to be like delighted about. And we were literally delighted in this spot. That's never going to happen against other people that we don't have information on. And if we're not paying attention, and we're not building information, and we're not making notes, and we're not using our database to exploit. I mean, at this point, I was literally looking for this guy. I was literally waiting for this kind of spot with this guy, because these hands happened within like a 4 to 5 day period. So this is exactly what we're looking for. We call in position. I think that's definitely best. I think that jamming is just going to get him to fold all his worse hands and call with all his better ones. And he obviously may stack off with ace king, but I think a lot of our equity against this particular opponent is going to come from just letting him bluff and calling down. So that's how we're adapting our strategy and exploiting. Do 7-6, very, very good flop for us. Obviously, all the ace jack, ace queen, ace king hands, we probably expect him to just go bluffing with, because why not? And obviously, queen 3 of hearts was going to be in there as well. So we're never folding. 10 of clubs isn't the best. I mean, we have a backdoor flush draw, but it also blocks him having some bluffs. Never ever folding here. We call. 9 of clubs. If he has an overpair without a club, then we now have a little bit more equity. We have obviously the 8, we have the club, and a 10. But also a huge proportion of the time when he bets, we're just going to be good. And I don't think that this is very close. And I think against a lot of people, you're going to be like, cycle, but this is just a snap call and like fist bump, pretty happy about it. 5 of diamonds, and he just has king queen high. So like I said, I haven't been able to get any more spots against him. I think he's avoiding me because we used to get into like spots all the time within a small period of time. I think he was maybe very tilted, but at the same time, yeah, you can see how if we just play our normal strategy and don't use the information we have, we're going to miss a lot of value, because we're not going to play pretty much after the first standard spot we had that we got information. None of the spots that we played, I mean, apart from maybe the 10-9 of clubs, which you're going to check against some opponents as well. I don't think we're going to be taking this line very often in the other spots, or ever, especially with the deuces of the 4s, without the information that we managed to gather. So that was the concept I wanted to discuss. Having a very good overarching strategy, which I haven't gone into what mine is yet, but I believe that I do have that. You have to put this kind of play in. You have to make notes. You have to be vigilant. You have to use those notes, and you have to think about what you are trying to get your opponent to do and what his tendencies are when you make decisions, rather than what your general overarching good strategy is going to be. So I hope this was, obviously it's quite entertaining in terms of the hands are very interesting, but also I do think that it's a very important concept, a very simple one in some respects, but a lot of people will say play a very strong strategy. You're going to have, in the fours and deuces hands, you're going to have way better hands there that you don't need to call with those hands, which is true. But at the same time, I do think that the logic breakdown in those pots leads us to make some quite comfortable call downs in situations where we would never be able to make them if we weren't paying a lot of attention. So that's going to be it. Thanks for watching. And I will make another video soon, hopefully at 16 NL, when we finally get to move up because of heroes like this. So thanks very much.